Blue Mind is a platform to raise consciousness and to elevate your performance and develop your physical and emotional health. We interview experts in mind and body, writers, sports people, entrepreneurs, and those with an inspiring story to tell to help us all raise our performance to the next level. So welcome to Blue Mind.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Blue Mind Show. Absolutely pumped to have Dr. Matt Slavin back on. You've sent a handful of questions through, so we're gonna ask him. It was a brilliant first conversation, very insightful. We dug deep into a number of things. Mainly, and a key takeaway was this element of self-awareness that's not spoken about. We mentioned about personal development, and there seems to be this perhaps generic message of what you can do, but we're looking to dig a little bit deeper here, expand our awareness and highlight a few things that maybe people aren't aware of. So absolutely delighted to have you guys back listening. I think we're approaching 70 subscribers now, so continuously building. Ed's here. Hello, Ed. You all right, mate?
Hello, Mark. Hello, Dr. Matt. How are we doing? How are we doing? A lot of good hoodies tonight. Loving the hoodie action. Matt obviously didn't get the memo, but we're good to go.
You did. The communication channels didn't come through, so it's upstairs.
But we all got the unshaven memo, though. I'm glad to see. Cool. Let's get straight into it, because we had a brief conversation offline just now, and something came up, and we were like, oh my gosh, we need to hit record and discuss this. Something that's happened, really basic action that we took as Ed and I took as Blue Mind, is just to start a WhatsApp group. And the people that we've been speaking to for a few years now, people that reach out, whether they've heard us on a podcast or listened to a YouTube video or read a blog, etc., people tend to reach out once they can, they feel heard or they can relate to somebody's story, right? So we've got a WhatsApp group with I think 15 guides now, relatively low numbers. But if you're listening to this and you want to be part of a safe, non-judgmental environment, one that's also going to hold you accountable as well for the type of person that you say that you want to be, and that vision for the future, then message us on Instagram, drop us an email. All the information is on our website at www.bluemindapproach.com. But this leads us very nicely into connection and community. And Matt, I'm gonna hit you with one. What when I say connection, community, what does that mean to you in terms of what does that look like, and what would a meaningful community of individuals, how would you vision that?
Now, I think connection is one of the most important things of our needs, one of our basic human needs. And I think a huge amount of problems in the work I have when I meet men struggling with areas of life, I think a theme is disconnection. So, and I say disconnection, and it usually comes in three ways: either being disconnected from other people or serious, meaningful relationships, disconnection from themselves, which is a huge part of the work, the awareness bit we talked about last time, or disconnection with their place in the world, their meaning in the world, what they're doing. I think in those three categories, I see a lot of people. So connection is hugely important. So when I hear the word connection and what you're doing, I think it's great. I think it's really important. And I think particularly men, when we grow up as men, if you look at, so I'm a psychologist, we do all the child development stuff. You look at how kids develop, you see girls play. We're going to lean into some stereotypes here, but more often than not, they're quite true. You see girls play, they tend to play around relationships, about asking each other, about building their play through connection, language, sharing ideas. Boys tend to physically build stuff together, and they do things by going sidelong and constructing. But we learn early on, I think, maybe not how to have those meaningful relationships, those really, that sense of connection where someone's got my back and I can reach out to people when in times of need. And I think that's essential. Like we can go more in detail into this, but it's absolutely fundamental to good human life.
Yeah.
So great.
Gosh, that if you don't mind it, that really hit me. That really hit me because I'm 39 years of age, and I come from a very kind and caring family, but I genuinely feel, right, and this is a part of me, and I'm not saying the whole man, it's not all the time, but there is a part of me that feels like a family member, a male family member, whether that be my dad or my brother, has never put their arm around me and said, "Hey, you've got this," or "I back you. You might not be where you want to be, but you're doing okay." And I think that's really important. That's really important. There's this element of positive leadership. What came up to me and made me feel quite emotional as well was this: the last time that I felt part of that type of environment was playing rugby, amateur rugby, a group of friends from school who were prepared to show up on a Saturday and physically tackle other men for you and get back up and do it again. And there's something extremely powerful about that. I can remember having everyone gets together at the beginning of the game, the dressing room, these huddles, everyone screaming and shouting at each other. And it's extremely raw. You really do feel this sense of connection and that part of something. And Ed, this might have triggered something in your mental chatter, because we shared a few voice notes today about how England's success last night in the Euros, how people feel connected based on these positive outcomes. But at the same time, if they were to lose, it would dramatically go the other way, which is absolutely fascinating. That once we make a decision to attach ourselves to potentially an outcome and we don't get it, how funny that pendulum can swing. Do you remember the notes, Ed?
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing, Mark. I could see some emotion in you, and it's thank you for sharing that, especially about male role models in family. And I think it is a very common thing of getting male validation and connection. And thankfully, I think we hopefully have good relationships with our own kids, where we're constantly validating them and telling them they're good enough, which is so important, I think, isn't it? Hopefully, I mean, they can comment on that themselves, but that's the working hypothesis. I think we talked about the football. I just my question to you, Matt, was going back a little bit. When people talk a lot about connection to self and connection to others, and I think people will be listening to this maybe going, what does connection mean? What does that? I can understand being connected with other people is, the theory is, you have strong relationships and you're honest and truthful and you show up, you're vulnerable, you can be yourself. And I think connection to self is knowing yourself, because if you don't know yourself and accept yourself and understand yourself, how can you connect to other people? So it's very hard to connect. And this has been in relationships I've had where I've in my marriage, I don't think I knew myself well enough to connect, and it's not looking backwards, but how can you really connect with any human being? And so I just want to discuss that a little bit for people that are saying, okay, what does being connected to myself mean? How do I get there? What do I do?
Great question.
And you're the psychologist, so it's to you first.
So I see a lot of men where this is the central problem, that it's almost as like, so one way to describe it is they're like the world sees different sides of them. So like, let's think about a shape of like a hexagon, a six-sided shape. And so this is a really effective strategy that we learn in early life. It's actually an attachment strategy, is that you shape yourself to the environment you're in. You go, all right, when I'm with my work colleagues, I'll be this kind of guy. When I'm with the rugby team, I'll be this kind of guy. When I'm with my girlfriend, I'll be this kind of guy. And so you've got different parts of yourself. And I often meet men who haven't learned to integrate all those different parts. So it's almost as like there's many sides to the person. But then when I say, well, what's that all together? Where's the core of it? It feels a little empty. And in deep meaningful connections with others, and this is some of the work I do with men, is that they feel like, yeah, but it felt really hard to connect with others. And they find as if, I know you're present, but I just don't feel you really here. I don't see all of you. And I think that's because the man in question, those men that have these experiences, haven't felt comfortable in their lives, and maybe from early life, to really just be comfortable with, and this maybe go back to a link before, who I am is okay, rather than what I do has to be okay. So they get validation from their efforts, from their achievements. But just being myself, all the variations of that, it doesn't feel comfortable. So they don't spend time with it. Wow. So you've got to spend time with a therapist. That's the way. That's the really good work you can do.
Two great I'm going to go deep. I'm going to go deeper. So I'm going to go deeper. So, I mean, from a personal perspective, which is all I know, connection to myself is being able to try and unpack my emotions, to try and sit in my feelings, to accept all of me, and see aspects of myself which I like, aspects of myself which I don't like, and to try and show up in the world knowing what I stand for and what I think the person that I am. What do I want to leave behind? How do I want to present myself to people? How do I want to connect with other people? How do I want to leave them feeling? And of course, doesn't always work as you hope. So that would be connection to self. As Mark said something to yesterday about, who are you when nobody's watching? Who are you when, it's not quite the phrase, but it's something like that. And or integrity is what you do when nobody's there. And I think it's that ability to know yourself in the moments where you're not being distracted, you're not with other people, and do you like yourself, right? Are you calm in your own company? Can I throw that back to you about a bit deeper, maybe?
So I think you're right. I think a lot of people struggle to feel comfortable in their own company. The thing that I'm a psychologist, and it might not be surprising to know that psychologists have their own therapists. That's like your therapist.
Not surprising. Yeah, it's mandatory, isn't it? I think, isn't it?
Pretty much. It depends who you see, which type of psychologist or counselor, but yes, it should be. So yeah, every therapist should have their you've got a grand therapist, you've got a great grandfather therapist, and it goes back. So
and you've got Joe Rogan at the top.
I like Joe Rogan, but it's not my therapist. So
hi Joe.
I've had
Joe, if you're watching, sorry.
We'll go to the next one. So I've had my experiences. I've had my experience of depression, and really face some really dark times in that. And so I've had to find my way out of that. And one way that I found my way out, and a metaphor I use for this kind of thing you're talking about, is that really coming to terms with being comfortable with yourself, I think, is the true act of bravery. And what it is lots of men fear going to the dark places in their mind. They fear as though if I sit still and I look at the thoughts that come up, if I actually sit still and think, what would I do? There's like a darkness there. Churchill called it his black dog, the depression. There's lots of metaphors about darkness and something a little bit sinister inside. What happens if I allow myself to touch that? And the experience I've had personally and my professional experience all says the same thing, that by going to the darkness is where you find the light. So that is the work of talking about your fears, the pains, the adversities, the things that I've had the privileged job of people speak to you about things they've never said to anyone in their whole life, things they've been holding on to since they're 7, 8, 12. That's my job, is to do that work with people. And they come out the other side lighter.
Yeah.
It's hugely transformative work. But it's a scary thing to do before you start it, because people fear, what's going to happen? What am I going to find? Well, and am I going to find out something awful about myself?
Yes. I mean, Nietzsche, I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but I mean, Nietzsche and Jung talk a lot about the darkness that people carry, and it runs through a lot of psychological training, I guess, and being able to express those feelings and thoughts and fears, and I wonder if it's different for men and women, or is it just a human condition, perhaps?
I think it's a human experience, because I think we kind of taste two things. These things we'll go either thread. One is that as humans, we've learned very well to find threats and trying to avoid them. So originally that was saber-toothed tigers or dangerous storms, or we do things to protect the outside world, make sure we're safe from external threats. When we develop language in our cortex, which most mammals don't have, we have sophisticated language. Our earlier primal brains, which looks out for all the dangers, hasn't caught up to know the difference between imagined threats, words in my head, versus external threats out there. So worries about the past and the future, imagined fantasies. I've worked with people who fear they're going to physically hurt people, sexually hurt people. Of course, they never would do, but they fear just because they have the thought, what if I do it? So very painful thoughts then will trigger the same survival responses as if you were in a fight or flight situation. So that's a human experience. That's not a man or woman experience. I think one of the differences between men and women is women early on in life and continue to share their deepest things with their friends. Men, again, stereotypes, but men typically tend to hide and withdraw the things they're most fearful of. And it's like Gremlins. Do you remember the kind of do you remember the film Gremlins?
They get bigger.
Yeah, exactly. If they go bigger in the dark, and when you bring them out into the light, that's what kills them off. And you definitely don't want to feed them in the dark as well.
Great metaphor. Yeah, I mean, secrets make you sick, literally. So,
yes, they will do.
So talking therapy is a great way to express maybe your deepest emotions, your whatever fears, and talk. That's one way to do it. And I think most people would probably say, yes, well, that's great. Therapy would be great for me. I can explore my inner child. I can work out who I am because I get to talk to who I am. I get to explore with a third party like yourself what's really going on in your head, and you can be truthful. And I think being able to articulate your truth, how you really, who you really are to a human being. I mean, people talk about journaling being super important. It's very, as you said, it's very lightening. It's very enlightening and very liberating to talk to people about things you're carrying. If you're not going to go to a therapist for whatever reason, what can you do to unburden yourself and get to know yourself better? I think I always say to people, force yourself to spend time on your own. Because there's nowhere to hide, and as painful as it is, and I'm always amazed, and I often laugh with Mark about the fact that many people have never spent one day and one night on their own without a phone, literally in their own company. There's an American study that said that 70% of people in a room would rather press an electric shock than sit 15 minutes in their own mind. So that would be my advice to people: is get out of your mind and into nature and spend time on your own. We talked about this on the last thing. So back to you. What advice would you give to people to take this connection to self further? Apart from seeing you, of course, which is a given.
Of course. I actually would agree with you on your first point. I think spending time alone with yourself is a very important thing. It can feel very scary, so build it up. I think building a community, we go back to where we started, where it's not a huge leap about having to share everything and in depth with a psychologist, whatever fears might come up with that. Having a community where, I talked about this with one of my clients, and he talked about he can share more with others who share more with him. And he had this metaphor in his mind about like a game of poker. And for the people that put chips in, he was willing to put his chips in too. And so that kind of community where you go, you know, I'm gonna put out there some of my vulnerability. You go, well, okay, well, he's put some stakes in, you know, like in a risk kind of profile. They've put some risky stuff out there. Makes me feel a bit safer because I've got something on them too. I could be risky too. We're both going to look after what we've put out there is risky.
Yeah.
Community. Small ways to do that's really important. And journaling. It's a lovely way to do it. Spend time. You don't have to do passages and essays of writing, even if you get one of those things like a 6-minute diary for the beginning and end of your day that says, you know, what are you going to do today? What's your top priorities? What are you grateful for? What motto or ethos do you want to hold yourself accountable today? And at the end of the day, you unwind and you said, what 3 things went well today? What 3 things could I learn from today? There's a key one. And what am I going to do tomorrow to make, to be even better? Small things like that. Any practice here is key.
Thank you. Yeah. Mark, have you got anything to jump in on all this?
Oh my gosh, so much.
You're having brain sex again with yourself.
I'm just listening to all these things that are coming up, listening to all these things. I'll start with a question, because I love this conversation, right? Because this is how I view the world, in terms of I'm looking back to try to connect with myself more. I'm trying to understand my family and their upbringing and their family's upbringing in order to understand this compound effect that has led to me and certain behaviors or certain previous behaviors. And so for me, it's like, okay, great. I listened to this. What Ed's saying, good. Oh no, Dr. Matt, he's amazing. I'm gonna hire him. And you have your first session. You touch on the inner child, and it all makes sense. And you start to go, oh right, okay, yeah, that's why I'm here. My question is, what advice would you give to someone going through that process? Because I'm the type of person that would then want to go back in to the game of the family, right? And go, hey guys, I've had this amazing session and we've unearthed a few different things and this, and this. And I know from experience that when I try to create, I think it's really important that to not have that expectation that you might be able to empower or enlighten someone based on what you're saying. They need to be willing, right, to receive it. But my question is, someone commits to this process of self-discovery and connecting with self and inner child work. How much do they, while going through that process, how much do they share with family, not even close family, but family, friends? How much of that do they give, do they make private? Because what I suppose I'm looking to avoid for either myself or anybody is that as naturally as humans, we get super excited about something that we feel that we start to understand and that is helping us. And I can imagine that environments where you share that information and it's met with judgment, criticism, why are you doing that? There's nothing wrong with us. You going through that process suggests that there's something wrong with me. I'm not prepared to do that. It touches on what we said previously around this darkness and this discomfort, and it's so amazing. Like when you go into the darkness, right? That would be my advice. How do you advise your clients on what they do after they see you with the information they get?
Okay, yeah. So I'll pick one point out of what you said, and then I'll add to it. So there's an old. Let's go to a bit lighthearted bit. There's an old joke, a terrible joke in my work, which is, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb has to be ready to change. Yeah, it's terrible.
It's okay. I've heard worse.
But it's very true. We hope we can affect change in others, But the reality is we cannot control others' responses. I would love to feel like I'm the responsible one to help someone out of a dark patch, but actually it's a team approach. I can give some guidance. It's someone's work and readiness to be willing to change. The opposite, the other way around, it makes even more sense. That how egotistical would it be of me to say when somebody improves their lives that I go, oh, I did that for you. I made that possible for you. It just doesn't happen that way. So when people go to the families, often, okay, so what would I do with people? So early on in sessions, I would say to people, right, if we're embarking on some work together, don't make any big life changes right now. So hold fire on big life decisions and big life changes while we start this process, because things are going to be uncovered. Actually, in the process of getting stronger, you're going to feel more vulnerable for a while, because actually you're going to be exposing yourself to the rawness. So again, you might feel actually that whatever your family member might say on another day might feel even worse when you've opened up the box for yourself. And then I would work with them if at a time readiness where there's some relationship change they want to affect. In session, we would think about that. How are you going to say it? What are you going to say? One thing that often happens in the work I do with people, so I do talking therapy. Sometimes people don't talk much to me. We do things like EMDR, which is a trauma-based healing thing. It actually transforms memories and your beliefs about yourself without having to talk too much. It's really powerful through using eye movements. Often what happens at the end of that journey is people don't feel the need to explain to anyone else. And they often don't feel the need that other people have to understand, because they feel, I feel like I'm in a good place. And the acceptance part comes with, I'm in a good place. I accept that they're not going to be able to understand. And that's good enough or not good enough. And you can make decisions from that point. But actually that self-work often means whoever else is out there work is a secondary or even a non-existent move, because the work itself, is the most powerful work, actually.
I think letting go of the expectation of a loved one not understanding you, or indeed being on the same consciousness, spiritual growth wavelength, is one of the hardest but yet the most liberating things you can do. Unfortunately, with loved ones, they tend to be family or intimate friends or relationships. So the problem, of course, is that as you gravitate through knowing more about yourself and changing and opening that conscious door on your curiosity about yourself and other people and the world, and it's very difficult to gel holding on to relationships. And I think this EMDR thing sounds fantastic, because you can then start to see people purely for their positive things and why you love them. And, it's, again, assuming that you want to be. I mean, we know certain people on social media who advocate to be absent from parents. Josh, I forget, Josh Connolly is a guy who's had a very difficult time with his own parents, and he advocates cutting off parenting, toxic parenting. So I think we're all, certainly in my mind, there's a journey of putting your own, and I like what you said about you don't feel the need to explain them, which I think is what Mark was saying, and we've talked about this a lot. You don't feel the need for people to understand you, that you love. You can still love them and have a relationship, but accepting that it's maybe never going to be at the depth of honesty and understanding that you are now craving, because that consciousness and spirituality is about showing up in your true essence. Who are we? And I want to be able to talk about these things. I want to be open and libertarian. And if I'm feeling like I have to withdraw because it's not comfortable, and Mark, again, I think you touched on this, it's a painful place to be. And I've let go of expectations massively of some people being able to even have a conversation about anything. Like, it's football, the weather, and motorways, and it will never change. And I spent a long time, decades, wishing for something more, and it never came, and I tormented myself. And now I've let go of all expectations, and you'll never get there with some people. And that's okay, because I'm not right and they're not right.
Yes.
They're not wrong, I'm not wrong. We're just different energies, different journeys. Can you love someone deeply that you're not intimate and able to talk to on a personal level? I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can. You might be related to them, you might be friends with them. Can you really know someone who's not willing to be brutally honest and vulnerable with you? I don't think you can. I think you can go to for a pint with them, go and watch a game of football, play squash. I'm not sure. And just to finish, the problem that I think people have is this is Mark's question, I think, once you open that door to wanting to know more about the world and yourself, that door gets wider and wider and wider, and it's like a self-fulfilling, not chicken and egg, that's the wrong phrase. You become curious and then more curious, and it's really difficult to find. And I think, to finish, you have to find people who get it. That's the only way you'll survive, I think, isn't it? And maybe it's a therapist, but it's a new set of people on your wavelength.
Well, it comes back to that. Yeah, it comes back to that loneliness. So this is an incredibly painful part of life, of the discovery that those that you think are closest to you aren't, or don't get it, or you can't fully express yourself. It's like the Matrix, Neo takes the red pill rather than the blue pill, and he goes, "You sure you want it? Because once you take it, you can't go back." And I think a lot of life is lived in a lot of our lives. I think actually, being a bit philosophical about it, lots of our lives are constructed to not think too much. Actually, carry on as you are. Thanks very much, because that would be more helpful for society if you didn't question too much and you got on with things. So when you do stop and you don't play the game that everyone else is playing, it can be very painful and very lonely, because you're not playing the same game as everyone else, and you might be, why are you not drinking with us? Or why are you not going to do, we always go down the football on Saturdays, and you're not doing that anymore. Or what do you mean you're not going to come to our dinners that we do as a family? We always do those. And you go, well, it's just not good for me anymore. That's what we do. So all these decisions are tough decisions. And I think you're right. There's been definitely a theme on social media about toxic relationships. You should cut them off. There's like someone does something bad, it's wrong. You realize that the cutting is the important bit. Severance. I think severance from your past with a lot of exploring can be a helpful thing. There are plenty of people I've worked with where, my goodness, they need to get away from their families. It's terrible experiences. Yeah. But severance as a repeated theme, if you completely go, that's not good, separate that. That's not the, what are you left with? Who are you? If all your life experiences you cut off from yourself, that's a very disconnected, empty place. The harder work is in being able to make the decision, is that person good in my life? Although you have to go, albeit I'll accept the pains of things I can't have with them. Or you make a decision that this is really someone's harmful for me and I can't grow in this space. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a tough one, right? It's a tough one.
There's a few things I've heard there. A few things. So this element of potentially social media creating this cancel culture like we see on TV, and this toxicity. I really like to see it as a detox. And if there is somebody potentially that you think is causing you to think negatively or feel negatively, just explore spending less time with them, right, for a period of time, and see how you feel. Listen to the thoughts, the feelings that come up. Then when you bring them back in, again, recognize, acknowledge what comes up, the thoughts. The big question that came to me when I was listening there was, because again, this is element of self-awareness. We're talking about our own self-awareness and then understanding other people's level of self-awareness, right? So how many different levels of self-awareness are there, or do you believe there are none?
I love this show. You definitely don't pull punches on questions. Okay, so there's multiple. If we just think about how you might understand yourself, there's three levels that I think are probably the most helpful way to think about it. That's the way I would work with people. I think there's a straight up, if we think about it like let's pick an emotion. So the first thing is you tie yourself to that thought or emotions. That's the first level of really not being aware. So your actions mean who I am. So I'm angry, or I am anger would be the first level of that. The next level is to be able to separate a gap to be, there is a looking part of me, there's an observing part of me that can reflect on my own experience. So I'm having the thought that I'm angry is the second layer. And the third layer is almost as if there was a Matt sitting on the couch over there looking at this Matt going, and he says, I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I'm angry. So there's three layers of separation of I'm angry, and there's no gap there. With no gap, there's no gap between stimulus and response. I'm having the thought that I'm angry already separates, yeah, because something is making me angry. What is it? I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I'm angry. Wow, I'm really in that. Oh, that's interesting. Am I in a, what's going on that's making me in this place to start having thoughts of anger? That allowance, that can be a practice, by the way. That feels like, how possibly could I do that about myself? I'm no monk. You don't need to be a monk to do that. Actually, that work is done in the real world, where you do mindfulness practices, and I'll teach you meditations. You step and you look at yourself. The more that you can do that, the more you have the ability for mentalization is the complex term in psychology, but I can put myself in the shoes of someone else. My thoughts and feelings are different from somebody else, and I can imagine what they might be thinking and feeling in a situation responding to me. So lots of people don't do that very well. Lots of people assume, or lots of people don't even think about the other person. But you do the work for yourself, also enables you to do it better for your partners. Also, you just think about a marriage or a good friend. You can be a better friend or a better loved one if you do the work yourself, because you can see the same process of stepping outside yourself means you can then step into their shoes better as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible.
I love that because that reminds me of a Deepak Chopra book that I read around three levels of consciousness, where three levels of awareness, where it's contracted awareness. So you're just that reminds me of the anger piece. It's like a closed fist. It's contracted. It's very like this, right? Then you move to a space of expanded awareness, and I would always remember that by just opening my hand. It's expansion, and from there you then eventually you move to an element of pure awareness. There is no hand, right? And that's what I'm hearing is a combination of that plus NLP techniques of observing a situation, being the observer of a situation, which then takes the emotion out of it, which again allows you to expand your awareness, which is just brilliant, I think. And there's something that people are not taught at school or by a parent, etc. And even just to, I think there's so much weight and value and understanding that if you are in an emotional situation, that you are in a place of contracted, you are really feeling it and you can't see anything else, right? And it is just a case of coming back to that self-awareness piece, taking yourself out of it. It's a real skill, but it's definitely possible. I truly believe this because I've experienced it myself. That you just start to become the observer. You're the Matt sitting over there observing your situation. Suddenly the emotion's gone. Suddenly you've decluttered. The murky water has cleared. Now comes positive action.
I do this work a lot in workplaces as well, where you do like difficult meetings between managers, employees. And because in those situations, it's very hard. The soft skills is the thing that people don't have, because we're not taught some of these key skills. Because you're right, in a situation, how can you keep a level head? And I don't mind this, actually. I think it's important to express your emotions, but there's a difference between expressing your feelings, between being controlled by your feelings. So the difference of a manager or a family member, you're screaming at someone, and then afterwards, if you're out of control, you regret all the things you said because it's not actually what you wish you would have said. Versus being able to see, like you see the wood for the trees, actually have clarity about what's going on, and being able to say, I'm really angry about how this has happened. I felt so dismissed. I can't believe you would do that when you knew this was so important to me. And I want us to talk about this because we've got to find a way forward, because if we don't do that, I'm not sure what's going to happen next. There you can have a whole conversation. My God, a painful conversation. The first one is just an argument.
I mean, why do
what's come up for you, bud?
For me, gosh, I've got so many things. How long have we got? I mean,
going to wrap up soon, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we said an hour.
Final bullet point.
I think, I don't know. I'm trying to go back to what's helpful for guys stuck in a whirlwind, who are overwhelmed, who are emotional, who are struggling. And I'm trying to come back to when I started to talk to my emotions as a friend. Whenever I get anxious or overwhelmed or a bit stressed or feeling emotional, I try, and I don't always achieve it. I try and, apart from breathing, which is an absolute game changer to calming your nervous system down, and sitting with your eyes closed just for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. Doing what you suggested, both of you talked about putting your emotion in a separate box, if you like, and talking to it. So when anxiety comes, it's like, hello, Mr. Hello, anxious. You're here. That's okay. And the more you open it up, the more you demystify it, the more you open yourself up to an emotion and sit with it and realize it's normal, and everyone gets anxious and everyone has these feelings, then you kind of disarm it. And you can disarm. Obviously, there's different degrees of this. People who are chronically depressed and anxious and suffering, it's not maybe just quite as easy. But I think, it goes, a lot of this overwhelm goes back to the monkey mind, to mental chatter. And it might not be that it's a specific problem that people can put there to fix. It's, we talked about burnout. We talked about the ruminations that people have. This kind of excessive overwhelm of thoughts. So how do you relate someone in that state who is struggling with excessive rumination and excessive thinking to the longer term development of getting to know yourself? Because the two, what came to mind to me is that one is like short-term skills, it's short-term addressing of the overwhelm and anxiety, the pain. The other is a longer journey of self-awareness. Who am I in a child work? What do I believe? What's my truth? And I just, that's the wonder of this, is the two together. And I don't know, that there's maybe not an answer here. It's just what's coming up for me. Does that make any sense?
The way I can make sense of it is, I'll lean back on my world for it. So there was a lady called Judith Herman, who's a very, very preeminent psychologist and trauma theorist. And she kind of wrote the foundation for how do you help people when they've gone through loads of difficulty in life. Trauma, by the way, doesn't mean that you're in a car accident. It means that you've been through hard times. Trauma is experiential and it's subjective. It's not the event, it's your experience of the event. So we're talking about broad life here. And then, so this informs the way I work with people. So there's 3 phases. There's always 3 phases. The first phase is skill development. You meet someone for the first time, you need to give them the skills to be able to ground themselves, manage their feelings, know what's going on in their body. So psychoeducation, grounding, stabilization. Teach them the skills to find a moment of pause. I was just listening. I just saw Dan Carter. In my head, it's one of my great heroes of rugby. And he, as you see on my social media, have a look later, he has a video where he talks about just before he's got a really important kick a goal, and he's got all this expectation in his mind. He's got all this self-doubt. He just thinks he's got 80,000 people screaming at him and thinking, I'm going to miss. And then he's obviously worked with a psychologist, because the way I can hear him talk, he's worked with a psychologist. He points his toes into the ground. He grounds his toes in for 3 seconds. He takes 3 deep breaths. Then he pauses. Then he goes into his routine. So we learn those skills. You know, athletes do this. They learn all these skills. And this is what I do in the first phase of people. You've got to learn the skills, because you can't go into, this is what I say to people, we can't venture into murky waters until you know you're safe to swim back to safety. So I don't want to bring people into a dark place of their childhood. Brilliant. Until they know, oh, I don't worry that I'm going to get lost in this memory and then I'm done for the next week. I want them to feel like we'll go into bad memory and then we're going to heal that memory. And if at any point you need to come up for air, that's fine, because you know how to do that. I'll teach you how to do that. So we do skill development, then we do the deeper work, and then we do reintegration into life. So then, like what you said about actually before, okay, well, how do I make my life now how I want it to be? What, if anything, am I going to share with other people? What changes do I need to make? That comes third. Stabilization and grounding, the reprocessing phase, and then the integration to life phase.
Fantastic.
And that's kind of what you're saying, Ed. It informs the way I do work, informs the way that any good psychologist would do their work too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's practically really helpful, that people can see there's a short-term need to regulate, but there is a longer-term need to invest in yourself, to unpack why you're feeling malcontent, or and that's complex, right? Because it can take a lot of soul searching, and a lot of it is still skill development, right? Long-term development is still, it's setting boundaries, it's articulating feeling, it's being able to communicate with and listen and being vulnerable, and these are new skills for a lot of people. So brilliant. I mean, great conversation. I could go for hours on this. I don't even know what we've been talking about now, but it feels like we have been.
Well,
I heard the word Dan Carter. That was about it. But yeah.
Well, it's always you guys, a pleasure to talk to. Like I'm invested in men's mental health and well-being. So if these things help 1 or 2 people, then great. If there's a time where people have more questions, we'll put another date in the diary at some point, and we'll do another part.
Okay, we've got 4 minutes left of the hour. Mark, do you want to try and sum up, or
yes?
Any last?
Oh my goodness,
you're good at
Mark. My absolute best.
Go for it.
My absolute best. The 2 things that I'll highlight that I've learned from the conversation that I would suggest that other people make a tool, one of their tools in their toolbox. The first thing is that analogy of the poker table. Like I speak very openly about my gambling addiction for over 15 years, specifically poker, not understanding it. And I could really relate to that, because in this community where someone shoves a load of chips in and other people at the table go, hey, that guy's shoving some chips in, I can shove some chips in as well. I'm going to be in this. I'm going to be vulnerable as well. I feel comfortable being courageous. And think about that, because the person that sits at the table and shoves and is apprehensive and puts maybe 1 or 2 in, that person's not ready. That person's not yet willing. That person maybe hasn't come to the conclusion that they why they, very important, the why they want to change, because the how already exists. How they change is you can look it up, you can speak to good people like Matt, but they don't truly understand their why. So in your life, be conscious of who's putting in the chips, who's going all in, who's committing to winning the pot, and who's not. That is a big takeaway for me. And the part that we finished on towards the end there around skill development first. I like that analogy of the murky water. Okay, I'm only going to take you to the murky water if I know that you have the tools, you have the skills to swim back. I believe that's extremely helpful, especially as an aspiring coach that's been coaching people up and down the UK for a couple of years now. That is so important, because I think sometimes we can look to take people straight into the darkness, into the murky water, because we think we can help them. But actually, let's suit people up before they go into battle, over their, whether it be inner child or relationships with close family members. That would be the two big bits. And then the acknowledgement, the third would be the acknowledgement of Matt. He mentioned the work that he's doing with businesses. If you are a manager, a director, a business owner who is looking to invest in, and I'm talking about seriously commit to improving the well-being and mental health of your staff, I would strongly suggest that you reach out to Matt and have a conversation, because he's someone that does care. I love the quote of, people don't about, they want to see how much you care, right? They don't care how much you know, they want to know how much you care. This is someone that deeply cares. He's given us 2 hours of his time now to have an open, vulnerable, transparent conversation. So I would strongly suggest investing in him. Did I miss anything, Ed? What were your key takeaways?
No, wonderful, Mark. I would just add, I think if you are a guy or a woman or a girl who is not feeling connected with the people around them or themselves, you feel like something is off, you don't feel validated, you don't feel heard, you feel lonely because you're feeling isolated in your brain and your mind. I think we've covered a lot of topics tonight where, firstly, any feelings you have are legitimate and valid. Secondly, professional help like Matt is a good idea if you can get to it. There will be a different day where there are people that understand you, and you can have conversations with people who will hear you and listen. You'll be brave enough to say the things you need to say, and you can be truthful. And I would just encourage people to think about their community, seek new communities where they feel unfulfilled in the existing communities, but and seek out people who will understand you and will love you in the way that you need to be loved and listen to you in the way that you need to be listened to. And that takes some courage, as I think we've talked about. And but it is there. And once you find a few people, life can change dramatically. And it, as I said, it requires courage, but it also requires you to decide what you want in your life and who you want to be and who you already are. And that's the difficult bit, is the only way you'll decide who you are, what mistakes you've made, and where you want to go to, is a painful, in my experience, a lot of painful self-reflection, time forcing yourself to be on your own, asking yourself difficult questions about why you've taken certain choices and certain paths, and acknowledging them, accepting who you are, and understanding what is you and what is external conditioning from childhood, pressures of modern culture, Western civilization. But it's very complex. Not sure if that kind of added any value there, but hopefully it did. So yes, it's a very, very glib, but it's about finding whatever your truth is, that you can talk to it and not feel any shame, not feel embarrassment, not feel like you're speaking out of turn, but being comfortable to speak, whatever those words are. And that it's a very lonely place if you don't feel comfortable to speak. So I'll end on that, Matt. I'll leave the floor to you, if I may. Thank you very much. Anything you want to say to wrap up?
Oh, I've spoken enough. In my profession, I don't talk all that much. I do a lot of listening. So, so it's nice to it's nice to talk and for others to listen. So, but if anyone wants to reach out at all, you can Google my name, Dr. Matt Slavin, or the Burnout Psychologist is my work with corporates and teams. Maybe you put a link in the notes and reach out. We're always welcome to have a chat and see if I can help at all. So
great.
Thank you two for doing what you do. It's really meaningful. It's really important.
Thank you for that. And thank you for making the time. It's 9 o'clock. I think we've all probably had enough of talking. So good night to our 70 viewers. See you again. Please leave us any feedback, any comments, suggestions, and thank you very much, everyone.
And also, if you do like these conversations, please do hit the subscribe button, give us a like, share it with someone that might see some value in it as well. We mentioned the WhatsApp group. It's a free WhatsApp group. If you want to be a part of that, drop us a message either on Instagram at the Blue Mind Approach, or head over to the website www.bluemindapproach.com. Email Ed or myself. We've got an amazing retreat coming up in Ibiza. That's people expressing interest. That's going to be in September. It's going to be a space exactly like we've talked about, where we will reflect, heal, grow, and experience together. So very looking forward to that. Thanks again, Matt. Great to see you again. Ed,
you're very welcome.
Always good to see you guys. See you, buddy.
Likewise. God bless. Thank you for listening to this Blue Mind conversation. We hope you've enjoyed the content, and ask a small favour that you like and share the page. The bigger the page, the more interesting the guest should be, and the more content we can put out. If you are interested in talking to Mark and myself about any of the topics covered, coaching, speaking, or any other collaboration, please drop Mark or I an email at ed@Blue Mind Approach or mark@Blue Mind Approach, or contact us on our social media channels. Thank you for listening. Take care.